nice to see so many people after Aave. I barely made myself here, so I kind of understand. Who was in Aave yesterday? Cool. And who wants back? Yeah, today's things that we're going to discuss about is the Aave Protocol version 3. So at Aave, we have been building decentralized finance for the past 5.5 years. And every single kind of like iteration has been, I would say, like an optimization of capital efficiency and risk management. And now that the Web3 space and DeFi as well has become kind of like more cross-chain, I want to introduce a bit more and go into details of the features that kind of like empower the cross-chain functionality that we have in Aave, in the V3 protocol. Yeah, and maybe I will give some more alpha on the next Aave. So main topics for me today, capital efficiency, risk and security, and also how we improved decentralization in the V3, and also just showing a bit of like a new experience layer that we created on the application user interface level. So one of the, I would say, novel features in the version 3 of the Aave protocol, and I don't know how many of you know Aave, so it might be new for decentralized finance, but essentially it's a protocol, and protocol is a set of rules that are running on smart contracts, where essentially at Aave you can deposit cryptographic assets and earn yield on these assets, and then of course you can use these assets as a collateral to borrow, let's say, stable coins to finance some other goal. Might be a finance opportunity, or might be just a degen yield farm in another network. And this is where actually the portal feature that we enabled becomes very valuable, because today, if you want to go from one network to another, let's say from Ethereum to Polygon or Avalanche or into layer 2s, Optimism, Arbitrum, essentially you need to bridge your liquidity one way or another. And it's a good function. I mean, it's a good feature if it's built very well, and it allows you to actually go into networks where maybe there is low transaction cost or a new community. The issue with many of these bridges is that you have quite long time periods that you have to wait when you port your assets. And in the Aave version 3, what we actually did is we created this kind of like a portal, or we call it portals, where you have each port, and a port can be a bridge. And essentially, it's an ability to get credit up to a certain amount decided by the Aave governance, and typical port might be a bridge that might get, let's say, up to 5 or 10 million worth of bridging liquidity. So essentially, what happens is that normally when you bridge from one network to another, essentially you're gonna have to wait that transaction to be confirmed and those assets to move. What the portal feature helps is that these ports, they can mint and burn A tokens in an under-collateralized format. So essentially, what is happening is that you could submit a transaction and A tokens are minted in another chain and then withdrawn from the protocol as the underlying asset and send whatever the user wants to send those assets. So essentially, it makes the cross-chain liquidity move more seamlessly. And I think it's kind of like the best way to do the cross-chain bridging, because essentially most of the liquidity will anyways be in lending protocols, because that's where the deposit capital is sitting, and it's the most liquid kind of form of capital. And of course, like, it's very risky feature in the sense that if you can, burn and mint A tokens into certain debt cap. There is a framework how you can become a port in the system. But the idea is that the Aave governance decides on the amounts and the caps on how much you can actually get this form of credit line. And of course, the idea is that then the Aave safety module could cover in any kind of incident. So the feature is deployed, and I think in the next couple of months we will see first ports coming in, and this might change a bit the way of how we transact with liquidity between networks. And essentially, it's a very good tool for bridges, but also I think we will see some way more cooler use cases for the portals. Maybe it's a way for help in terms of like the MEV capital opportunities as well. So it's a feature that we still don't know how people will actually use it or what they're going to build on top. And continuing the topic of capital efficiency, we created this feature called efficiency mode. So essentially, normally when you supply different kinds of assets as a collateral, you can borrow to certain borrowing power. And in traditional finance, we call it loan-to-value ratio. So for example, if you deposit Ethereum and borrow stablecoins, maybe you can borrow up to 60–70% of the collateral value. So, sorry, I'm still suffering from yesterday. So what the efficiency mode does, it really actually makes things very interesting when you have assets that are similar in terms of the volatility correlation. So you could use efficiency mode to deposit stablecoins. Let's say you deposit certain amount of DAI, and then you borrow a certain amount of USDT, and then you can basically short sell USDT in a very, very high borrowing power. So you could go up to 98% or even 99% in terms of borrowing power, which is quite significantly different. But it's also, I think like the more fascinating use case will be in the future when you have more and more liquidity in other stable coins such as euros, pounds, and so forth. So you could do actually very, very high leverage FX trading as well with this particular feature. But you could apply the same principles to, for example, borrowing staked ETH against staked ETH. And essentially, we've seen quite big amount of deposits in terms of the Lido staked ETH. I think the reserve is currently in 2.5 billion, which is quite significant amount. And essentially, what most of these addresses that are depositing the staked ETH, they're pretty much borrowing the Ethereum and restaking to Lido. So what I think at some point over time is that when we look at the rates on Ethereum in terms of like the deposit rates compared to staking, it's quite low at the moment still. But over time, as this behavior continues and you can get more borrowing power with the ETH staking as a collateral and with this higher efficiency mode, we could essentially see the deposit rate of Ethereum being very close to actually the staked ETH yield. And currently, the version 3 has been deployed over 6 different networks. We call them markets. The one that hasn't been deployed is on Ethereum, because there's going to be a actually smart contract update from version 2 to version 3. And that's going to be quite a big transaction, given there's a lot of billions worth of value in the smart contract. And we have to basically migrate the whole contract into a new one. So that's going to be a very interesting exercise. But yeah, that's then when we have the V3 on main Ethereum network, and you have this high leverage kind of like efficiency, then we will see the ETH rate going up. So essentially, it becomes kind of like a liquid staking yield market for staked ETH. You can apply the same principles to other staking assets, such as using stake AVAX as a collateral and borrowing AVAX. Yeah, so those were the degens features. Then we moved over to more kind of like a risk mitigation and security-based features. So one of the things we noticed that over the years that there's more and more requests for assets to get listed into the Aave protocol, and everyone wants their asset to be there for some reason. Of course, like it's really like Aave protocol is very empowering because essentially what it means that if you hold an asset of your community, you really don't need to sell that asset and lose the exposure if you need liquidity. So it gives the users and community members of different governance communities more flexibility. So essentially, we had a lot of asset listing proposals in the community. And the idea of this isolation mode that we implemented is that you could actually list more and more assets into the protocol in a way that they're segregated from the main assets. Essentially, if you want to list a isolated asset into the protocol, you can only borrow against that asset. So you need to enter to this particular mode, and you can only borrow stable coins. So this should help to scale the listing process and also silos the risk from the main assets as well. And I think this could be quite interesting use case for real-world assets, listing them in a segregated, siloed fashion as well. So pretty much, you could even add interesting, I would say, like token staking economics on top of the segregated listing, where the LTVs and the supply caps will move in a kind of like a liquid way, where the more you stake into this particular asset, you can increase the supply caps and also the LTVs. This is pretty basic. Supply and borrow caps. I mean, the protocol version 2 didn't have them before, so it was kind of like a. I mean, just to give some background, when we built the version 1 of the Aave protocol, we were expecting there to be maybe 15, 20 million worth of value locked in our kind of like mindset, and ended up being, I think, like 400 or 500 million in total. And with the version 2, we were expecting maybe we'll have like 2 billion worth of value locked at some point. Then essentially it went all over to peaked, I think, like 15 billion, so, and even more. So it's kind of like a sets you a mindset where you have to build these protocols in a scale, and basically that means that you have to build always like risk in mind. There's strict collateral requirements, so it's relatively small features. Basically, you can enforce a liquidation. You can set a LTV to 0 if you have a scenario like that without forcing liquidations. And it's just like an emergency feature if something happens to a particular asset. And then we have Price Oracle Sentinel. So essentially, we have now support for layer 2. So the V3 is deployed on Arbitrum, on Optimism, and they have this kind of like a sequencers that are posting transactions, and if that sequencer is down, this Price Oracle Sentinel basically pauses the liquidations, kind of gives a grace period for that. So it's a kind of like valuable feature for the layer 2s. And of course, we have risk admins. This is an interesting delegation feature. So essentially, you can delegate the risk management from the protocol, from the actual governance, into something like you could delegate it to Gauntlet, or to a maybe in the future to a risk DAO or something similar. Same goes for the interest rate curve adjustments. Listing admins is an interesting feature. So also smart contract delegation you could delegate into a new kind of a logic, maybe staking-based listing that I mentioned before, where the Aave community members, they can stake their Aave towards different kinds of assets, and that increases the risk parameters. Yeah, and these features are something that we built kind of like as a basis, as a foundations into the protocol, but essentially it's up to the community to build those risk admin, listing admin features that I actually mentioned. There is like a lot of, I'm not gonna even go all of this, but there's like a lot of interesting improvements, mainly gas savings and blah, blah, blah. Okay, so then we have the UI. So, you know, usually protocol developers, you really don't care much of the UI. But at Aave, we always kind of understood that, you know, to get more users, you kind of like need to make things more simpler. And essentially, we improved the user experience quite a lot. So, and this is the first time we actually rebuilt an application from scratch completely. And I really recommend that to do because it gives sort of perspective to you as a builder. Yeah, this is just an example. You can select different kinds of markets and I guess like there's few DeFi applications out there where you have support for multiple markets, and they look kind of like this. So where you have to like select a market and you know you select Avalanche or you select Ethereum or let's say Optimism and you see the market. So the probably next thing for us to do is basically figure out how we can consolidate all the markets and you know make it easier so you don't need to like jump from one network to another. Yeah, and the Aave governance proposals. I'm very proud of this new application. It looks very good. Yeah, but thank you everyone. Hope you enjoyed and yeah, thank you.